Hi everyone, for our debate, we will be conducting an informal debate on Ethical Code 1.06 Part D, stating behavioral analysts cannot accept or give any gifts to clients because it may result into multiple relationships. The debate will argue both the pro and counter side of the debate with research to prove each side, as well as a brief question and answer section. My name is Sarah from Michigan, and I will be the introducer for this group. Christina from Indiana will be our summarizer for the pro side. Emily from Michigan will be our researcher. Chelsea from Michigan will be our illustrator. And Melissa from Louisiana will be our summarizer for the counter side, as well as our fielder. To begin our debate, we will be discussing the pro side of the topic. The pro side of our argument agrees that behavior analysts should abide by the ethical code of 1.06 Part D. During this debate, we will discuss how receiving and giving gifts may lead to multiple relationships and conflict with your professional relationships. Also, during this section, we will briefly discuss how to appropriately and respectfully avoid gift giving. Now over to Christina, our summarizer for the pro side.
Thanks, Sarah. So just to kind of restate what Sarah already mentioned, the pro side of our debate is arguing that we should abide by the ethical code that states that behavior analysts should not accept any gifts or give gifts to clients because it creates a multiple relationship. So a multiple relationship is defined as a situation where multiple roles exist between a client and a professional. For example, this may be a situation where the professional is also a friend or a family member of the client. The ethical code argues that the problem with this multiple relationship is that it may impair the behavior analyst's objectivity or interfere with the behavior analyst's ability to effectively perform their job as a behavior analyst. And as a result, the act of exchanging gifts with one another may harm or exploit the other party involved. So with that being said, given the ethical issues that may arise, gift exchanging is highly discouraged in a professional and client relationship. Exchanging gifts with a client raises concerns about the therapeutic boundaries and professional relationship. And gift-giving arrangements have the potential to create conflicts with our clients. And so to go along with this discussion on crossing boundaries, there is something called the slippery slope phenomenon. And it correlates really well with this argument because it is considered one of the strongest arguments in monitoring professional boundaries. And it's based on the principle that certain actions will inevitably lead to a decline of ethical behaviors. So if professionals do not adhere to these standards of not crossing professional lines, their behaviors may cause relationships that are harmful to the clients. So what appears to be a minor act may actually result in unethical patterns of behavior. And ultimately, the behavior of accepting gifts or giving gifts serves as a powerful reinforcer. So that may cause the client to continue giving gifts, resulting in crossing the boundaries of a professional relationship multiple times. Accepting a gift once may communicate to the client that that's okay. And like I mentioned, it'll cause them to likely do it again. So given the nature of our jobs in this field, we are often put into situations where we have to decline gifts due to the ethical code. And most of the time we're working in homes, so we tend to, get close with the families we're working with. And also working with young kids, they may look at us as teachers, and it's not uncommon for students to give their teachers gifts for holidays or for special occasions. But however, there are ways to approach this situation and handle it professionally while still abiding by that ethical code. So some proactive ways to avoid accepting gifts that are offered. The company should provide a policy regarding gift giving that is reviewed regularly, and that it should reference the ethical code as well as the consequences for not abiding by that code. They should also discuss what is considered a gift. So a gift is not necessarily like an obvious present, but it could be something as simple as accepting a cup of coffee or having a parent buy your lunch for you. So we want to really ensure that the staff follows that policy accordingly. And in order to do that, we also want to train the staff on how to appropriately and professionally handle those situations. So we should acknowledge that how the staff member handles the situation can also affect the relationship. So the staff member should be polite and also recognize and acknowledge the gratitude, appreciation, and thought behind the gift when rejecting that gift ultimately. And there are situations that will likely come about in our roles as behavior analysts, but abiding by the ethical code will ensure that we are remaining professional with our clients. So now we're going to go to Emily, who will present the research for the pro side of the argument.
Thanks, Christina. The ethics code states that behavior analysts should not give or accept any gifts from clients because that would constitute a multiple relationship. So there are several negative side effects associated with accepting gifts from clients that can range from the intent of the gift or the meaning behind it and the formation of inappropriate relationships. Brown and Trangsrud focused on specific factors that were associated with professionals declining gifts that were given to them by clients. Their study consisted of 40 individuals who had a PhD in counseling or clinical psychology who were all licensed psychologists. The participants were mailed 4 case vignettes that focus on the ethical decision of accepting or denying a gift that was given to them by a client. All participants were provided with the same 4 case vignettes where they were given situations and then had to rate whether or not they would accept the gift given to them by their client. Each scenario focused on 4 main variables, which consisted of the value of the gift, the timing of the gift, the intent or meaning behind the gift, and the cultural context of the gift in order to determine which factors had a greater effect on the acceptance or the denial of that gift. So for instance, one of the scenarios that were given to the participants was the case of a 38-year-old female client who gives you an expensive watch in her 6th counseling session. It said it was around the Christmas holiday season and that she explains that the watch is a Christmas gift and that it is also a symbolic representation of one of the issues you helped her address in counseling. She further comments that she has had the watch engraved in your name and she doesn't tell you how much it costs, but you've seen this type of watch when you were out in the store and you know that it has a value roughly close to $200. So 85% of participants indicated that they would not accept that gift due to the monetary value of the gift and that the engraving on the watch made them feel like they were being sort of forced into something that they did not want to do or because it gave them the feeling that they were trying to be controlled by their client. Another interesting study conducted by Beth Ann Willingham et al. Provided 223 clinical psychologists with open-ended questionnaires who have or had received gifts from their clients in the past. These questionnaires were interested in things like when, how, and what gifts were given to them, what they did with the gifts after they received them, in addition to how they personally felt when the gift was given to them. So the results of this study concluded that the potency of the gift had a negative impact on the psychologist's feelings that dealt with issues of power. So these included the psychologist feeling like the gift giver or their client was trying to manipulate them and establish themselves as being in control. It also had a negative effect on the professional relationship with the client and that the psychologist felt that the client was trying to form a multiple relationship that they considered to be inappropriate. So to kind of just summarize the findings from both of these research articles, many of the participants felt that the acceptance of a gift from a client was inappropriate because it kind of opens that door to forming a multiple relationship while also having negative personal feelings about the intent behind the gift. So whether that's kind of related to things like issues of power or feeling like the client was trying to control them into something that they didn't want to do. Now I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea, where she will provide us with some visuals related to abiding by the BACB Ethics Code.
Hi guys, I have here, I'm going to go ahead and swap screens, a little bit of a PowerPoint for you guys to kind of follow through. So a lot of the studies and the research that we used for this presentation had very limited visuals. So what I ended up doing is kind of creating some of the visuals to make it very clear cut for you guys on the studies which were previously spoken about by Emily and Christina. So to start us off, like both Emily and Christina mentioned, we have here the Behavior Analyst Code of Ethics. So what we are referencing is Code 1.0 and Code 1.06 specifically, which is multiple relationships and conflicts of interest. This code has multiple aspects to it, but one of the aspects of it which is most important is D, which states that behavior analysts do not accept any gifts from or give any gifts to clients because this constitutes a multiple relationship. So like both Christina and Emily said, it's really important to keep that professional boundary, and this code really highlights that, and also states that by receiving or giving gifts to and from clients, you are engaging in that multiple relationship and crossing that boundary. Furthermore, the Knox article kind of also focused a little bit on this part of our argument and debate. The article's title was "Here's a Little Something for You, How Therapists Respond to Client Gifts." The study showed that regardless of viewing gift receiving as problematic or not, it created an internal debate within the therapist, and thus sometimes called for discussion with clients of therapy boundaries. So regardless of whether or not the gift was problematic, it did create that internal debate within the therapist. The gift events evoked a range of reactions within the therapist, which highlights the importance of being prepared during responding and reacting to this phenomenon. So within the article, they have a couple tables which are illustrated. So the first table was, it really shows the different domains and categories, the frequency of these things occurring, and also the illustrative core idea. The illustrative core idea is, in my eyes, kind of like an example. So for example, the types of gifts being small tokens, this was a phenomenon that happened pretty typically for the therapist, and this can range from things such as stuffed animals or other small items. Again, with things such as money or property, as you can see, these types of gifts happened more on a variant level, and for example, a client giving a therapist money. So these didn't happen as regularly. Again, here are more examples from Table 1 of the different categories, as well as the frequency and the illustrative core. All right, the second table illustrates the domains, categories, and the frequency of both the unproblematic gifts and the problematic gifts. So this is a little bit different. For instance, when the gifts are given, that's a good part to kind of focus on. So whether or not the gifts happened in the middle of therapy, whether or not that was an unproblematic gift or a problematic gift. And as you can see, if it occurred in the middle of therapy, it was considered an unproblematic gift on a more variant level, but as a problematic gift very typically. So this happened more frequently, and therapists consider this a more problematic gift than unproblematic. So you can really see here how that creates an internal battle for the therapist. Again, this is Table 2. So it just shows you some more. And then, like I said, there weren't many visuals, so we kind of came up with some ways and things to say to decline gifts. For example, you could say things like, "I so appreciate the gesture, although I cannot accept this gift due to my ethical code." Or thank you so much for your generosity. I truly appreciate the thought, but I can't accept this. I try to make sure I always stick to my code of ethics. As well as things such as thank you so much. Although I can't personally accept gifts, I can use this for the entire office for everyone to enjoy your donation. So like we were saying, you always want to make sure you are declining these gifts in a very respectful and appreciative way. But you want to make sure you abide by the ethical code. I am now going to go ahead and hand it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Chelsea. We have now discussed the pro side of the debate and how to appropriately deny gifts from clients. Now we will discuss the counter side of the argument. The counter side disagrees, believing accepting and giving gifts can strengthen and build a positive rapport with clients. During this part of our debate, we will discuss how denying gifts may cause more harm rather than good to the client and could possibly have a negative effect on their professional relationship. During this time, we will also define what a gift is and the symbolic meaning of gifts. Here's Melissa, our summarizer for the counter side.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll be discussing the counter side of the argument, which disagrees that behavior analysts should always abide by the Ethical Code 1.06 Part D. So first off, what is a gift? Webster's Third New International Dictionary defines a gift as something that is voluntarily transferred by one person to another without compensation. The value of a gift can either be monetary or homemade, but also has symbolic and psychological aspects to it. The recipient of the gift knowingly recognizes its status as being a gift and accepts it as such. When gift giving occurs, there's no prior claim by the recipient regarding the gift. Once this gift is received, the recipient is under no obligation to pay for the gifts in the future. Gift can mean many things, one of them being to fulfill social functions for individuals. Next, the cycle of gift giving consists of giving and receiving a gift. So the giving of a gift can be underlined by making a gift uniquely appropriate for the receiver. This does not necessarily mean selecting an object for a gift the receiver desires, but can also be accompanied in many ways. The receiver of a gift is also an important aspect in personal gifts. The receiver of the gift symbolizes the receiver's investment in the professional relationship or therapeutic relationship. There are many different categories of gifts. So the first category of gifts we'll talk about can be described as a verbal gift. A verbal gift can be defined as a verbal expression of gratitude from the giver to the receiver. Example of these verbal gifts can be the giver saying a simple thank you, the giver explaining how thankful they are for the behavior analyst's hard work, or a statement of how the behavior analyst has made a significant impact in their child as the client or the client themselves' lives. The second category of gifts can be described as gifts of gratitude. A gift of gratitude can be defined as a gift given in order to express gratitude toward a behavior analyst or other professional. Types of these gifts include edibles, baked goods, or any other food item that's given as a gift. They're usually inexpensive and easy to obtain. For instance, if a client has a session scheduled around mealtime, the client may bring in food such as pie, pizza, cookies, to share with their behavior analysts. Another example of an edible gift could be, imagine if a client's mother worked for a food distribution company and decided to bring in a box of chips for the entire clinic one day. Imagine a typical ABA session, utilizing edibles as reinforcement. When a client brings in an array of snacks for use throughout the session, maybe some chips, gummies, cereal, and some goldfish. At some point in the session, the child offers the therapist a goldfish and the therapist takes it. Although some people may not consider this as a gift has just been exchanged between client and the behavior analysis. Gifts of gratitude can also include types of gifts which are created at home and are not purchased by the individual itself. Examples of homemade gifts can include anything from a picture drawn by a client to a candle the client's mother's made. Lastly, gifts of gratitude can include gifts which an individual has purchased from a store, website, or third party. Examples of these gifts can range from a gift card to a box of candy. The next category of gifts is transitional gifts. Transitional gifts are those that mark a transitional function for the client or the behavior analyst. Types of these gifts include those gifts which are given at the onset of a treatment process, which could be a thank you for accepting the client onto the caseload. Another type of these gifts are those gifts which are given when a client meets a significant milestone in their treatment. For example, if a client's been working really long on, say, a skill such as writing and finally accomplishes this goal, the parents may present the behavior analyst or clinic with adaptable writing utensils to not only be used with their child, but to also benefit other children as well. The last type of transitional gifts are those known as termination gifts. A termination gift is one which is given at the time that they end services. For example, a client may give the behavior analyst a coffee cup or a special picture to hang on their wall to remember the client and all their success by serving, such as like a parting gift. The next category of gifts is religious and cultural observation. Gifts in this category fall under gifts given for holidays, birthdays, and other special occasions. Examples can include anything when holidays or other occasions occur during the year. Oftentimes, for child clients, birthdays and holidays are significant events in a child's social life, and gifts are often presented then. The last category of gifts is donations. Donations are items, both monetary and tangible, given to a charity or organization. For instance, if a client donates a blanket for a raffle being held by a nonprofit organization with a thank you note attached, technically this is considered a gift. The symbolic aspects which go along with gift giving are emotional aspects. Some of these include homemade gifts. Many times homemade gifts are inexpensive and are made with the intention to be given as gifts. These can range from a picture drawn by a child or from cookies baked at home. Another emotional aspect associated with gift giving is building a relationship with their behavior analysis. When it comes to building relationships with professionals who have such a large impact on clients' lives, oftentimes gifts are given in order to show appreciation for and maintain these open, close professional relationships. Oftentimes, if children feel safe enough to freely communicate their needs, the child may feel it necessary to present a gift to the behavior analyst, such as a picture or a painting. This represents the trust the child has for the analyst. Milestones are another emotional aspect associated with gift giving. When a client reaches an important milestone in their lives, oftentimes gifts are presented to the professionals who help them reach them. The last emotional aspect is termination. The majority of the time, termination of services marks a wonderful time for that client. It represents all the progress and success that the client has had with the behavior analysis. The second symbolic aspect of gift giving has to do with culture. Cultures have all different types of beliefs. And for children and parents of multicultural backgrounds, the exchanging of gifts may be infused with different levels of significance. For example, the Chinese culture, gifts are frequently given when forming relationships with others. In this culture, the giving of gifts not only serves as a display of gratitude for an individual, but also reveals the importance of generosity in the formation of social identity within the Chinese culture. In other cultures as well, gifts are given as a sign of respect to other individuals. So let's talk about what were to happen if a behavior analyst were to turn down a gift offered to them. Some clients may be deeply offended, or other effects of rejecting gifts may occur. If a behavior analyst were to reject a gift from a client, the analyst's denial of the gift may seem as communicating disrespect to this client. If the client presented a gift and happens to be a child, they may be hurt by the refusal if the child themselves made the gift. Broderick and Blewett used Piaget's stages of concrete operations to describe a child's incapacity of understanding abstractions. So due to the child's level of cognitive functioning, they explained how their result understanding probably would not be completely consistent with reality or with the information that adults need to convey. Another possibility when dealing with children is the child's expression of self may be repressed if the behavior analyst chooses to refuse the gift. From the child's perspective, it is developmentally appropriate for a child to offer items kindly, and it may adversely affect the development of the child if the gift is given in a genuine way and then refused. Children may also experience rejection of the gift as rejection of the child themselves. The perceived rejection to the child may hurt the child's feelings, which could then counteract the therapist's goal of staying sensitive to the client's needs. Once the child has felt rejected, it could alter further therapeutic relationships between the child and the behavior analyst. Along with children feeling rejected, clients from different cultural backgrounds may also feel rejected if a gift is denied and the therapeutic process may be altered. Lastly, refusal of a gift can stimulate defensiveness in a client, which impairs self-reflection and insight and may lead to the client to experience rejection of the gift as rejection of themselves. In order to ethically accept gifts as a behavior analysis, one could create guidelines and policies to the gifts they accept and present to their clients with this from the beginning. One could set monetary limits and know all gifts are not acceptable, and that relationship between behavior analyst and client must be considered when receiving a gift. The following guidelines are suggested by Dodds regarding gift giving. 1, if a client asks, suggest they better not bother with a gift unless they absolutely want to present this gift. If the client insists on presenting the gift and you have an opportunity for some input on the gift selection, suggest something small and inexpensive like a box of candy or a picture the client made you. If a child presents you with a gift, accept it graciously and gratefully. And if possible, display the gift in a public view for others to see. The behavior analyst should also consider the consequences associated with both accepting and denying the gift. With this being said, the analyst should consider the client's cognitive level of understanding, cultural differences, and belief systems before deciding which gifts should and should not be accepted. When it comes to donations being accepted for nonprofits or other organizations, special arrangements should be made for these. This will also help address the questions regarding the ethical considerations of accepting large monetary donations from past or current clients. When beginning to accept donations, nonprofits and organizations can demonstrate their commitment to ethical practices by being entirely transparent with financial information and fundraising practices. The organization should create a fundraising aspect or department and make sure to distinguish the donations are made for the organization rather than an individual themselves. The organization should clearly outline what donations will be used for and that no one particular individual will benefit from the donation being made. For example, the donation will be used to buy therapy materials, to pay for other clients to receive services, to go on social outings, etc. Open communication of all donations must be accurate and honest. The organization should create a website or some other public view for visitors to find information about the nonprofit budget size, source of revenue, information about board composition, programs, outcomes, impact staffing, and donors, with protecting the identities of those who wish to remain anonymous. The policy on accepting donations should also follow state-regulated fundraising laws. The last thing to consider when accepting donations for a nonprofit or other organizations is maintaining accountability to all donors. Organizations should do this by respecting restrictions on donors' gifts, disclosing to the public what the state law requires, and providing timely reports to foundations and or government funding sources as applicable. And listing donors on the organization's website as they would like to be acknowledged. Now I'm going to turn it over to Emily.
Thanks, Melissa. So a lot of the research on the acceptance of gifts focuses on the time in which the gifts were given, in addition to how it made the recipient of the gift feel. So as mentioned previously, Beth Ann Willingham et al. Conducted a study where they provided 223 clinical psychologists with open-ended questions pertaining to when, how, and what gifts were given to them in order to determine what factors played a role in the acceptance or denial of a gift. So while the results of that study concluded that the potency of the gift was a likely factor in the denial of a gift, they also concluded that the clinical psychologists accepted gifts given to them by clients 87.4% of the time. So there were three main factors that had an influence on their acceptance of those gifts from their clients, those being the timing in which the gift was given to them. So around Christmas time or the end of therapy. The gifts were understood to be a sign of thanks and gratitude. And the psychologist reported multiple positive feelings after receiving those gifts from their clients. For instance, they feel feelings of being flattered, touched, appreciative. So the psychologists were more likely to accept the gift when these 4 variables were factored in, but also keeping in mind the cost of the gift as well. So they wouldn't accept something that was probably more than $10. Another study conducted by Sarah Knox et al. Was interested in therapists' reactions to receiving gifts who were given to them by their clients. Results from this study concluded that therapists who received gifts from their clients had a positive reaction to receiving those gifts that were associated with a multitude of factors. Those being they liked the gift that was given to them, they felt that the gifts given to them were appropriate, they felt appreciative when they received the gift, and they felt that it promoted an increase in positive feelings towards the client. A lot of those personal feelings come into play as reasons why it's acceptable to accept those gifts from clients. So a lot of behavior therapists and behavior analysts feel appreciated when those gifts are given to them. I will now turn it over to Chelsea, where she will provide us with some visuals related to accepting gifts from clients.
Thanks, Emily. All right, so next up for this part of my presentation, I will be focusing on why there is acceptance in giving and receiving gifts. A lot of the articles highlight the fact that gifts, although not always appropriate, may be acceptable in certain circumstances, which is why I'm going to use some of these articles. Additionally, you might hear some repetitive information just because some of our articles really touched on both the pro and the counter aspects of our debate. So the first article I'm going to talk about is the Blanco article, Gift Giving and Receiving in Child-Centered Play Therapy, an Ethical Response. Like I mentioned, this article highlights the fact that on some occasions it is acceptable to accept gifts, and these circumstances are really based on timing, the type of gift, the referencing additional consultation, as well as considering the cultural and ethnic aspects. I put into a table for you guys to see more clearly what Blanco is talking about, because he really highlights the recommended strategies when faced with gift giving and receiving during child-centered play, and how to determine whether or not to accept the gifts. So first of all, Blanco touches on the timing of the gift and the different periods in the therapeutic process. For one, whether or not the gift was given during the initial period, and if that factors into determining whether or not one is going to accept or decline the gift, whether or not it was given during a transfer of case. The time of year can play a factor during the holidays, like Emily mentioned, Christmas time, child's personal achievement, or the termination. Additionally, the type of gift also plays a factor in acceptance. For instance, whether or not the gift is small or of monetary value, whether or not the gift is handmade or purchased. And also, it's important to consider the end result of accepting the gift. So, for instance, how will acceptance affect the therapeutic relationship versus how will declining affect the therapeutic relationship? Those are all factors which a therapist in this study really has to consider on whether or not they want to accept or decline a gift. Additionally, the study referenced the need for referencing additional consultation. Sometimes it's really important for a consultant to consult with supervisors or coworkers about the appropriateness of a gift due to the objective role in the process that they play. It might be easier to determine whether or not one should accept or decline a gift when discussing this with someone who's a little more far removed from the case. Like mentioned previously, it's also really important to consider the cultural and ethnic aspects. So the fact that exchanging gifts has different significance due to the cultural and ethnic backgrounds of the clients. Those are all important aspects when considering whether or not one should accept or decline a gift. And like I mentioned, these articles are part of the counter aspect of our debate because it does highlight the fact that gifts can be accepted on occasion, although not always. Kind of to touch on that, this article also touched on ways to avoid the topic entirely. So, for instance, including response in counselor's personal disclosure statement, as well as informed consent documents to safeguard the issue if one is really trying to avoid that. The second article that I kind of laid out for you is one that Emily used earlier in our debate. And like I mentioned, a lot of the articles throughout our debate, really you could see both the pro and the counter aspect of our debate. So in the Brown article, factors associated with acceptance and decline of client gift giving, like Emily said, the participants were 150 members with PhD in counseling or clinical psychology, all living within the United States. The method of this study was mailed surveys, like she mentioned, and they really focused on the value of the gift, the timing of the gift, the symbolic meaning of the gift, and the cultural content or context. The reason this really plays a part in this part of the debate, because although some psychologists did state they wouldn't accept gifts, few psychologists stated they would not accept gifts due to violation of their ethical code. So in other words, for the most part, gifts were acceptable for them. And the reasons for gift decline included cultural sensitivity, monetary value, or concern to the relationship following the decline. Some information on most likely to decline gifts and when. For instance, the psychologists reported that they would decline gifts when they were expensive, when they were presented during treatment and not at the end of treatment, or had sentimental value. Again, the measures of these vignettes were, and they would first read the vignettes, indicate acceptance or decline of the gift with an explanation, and then they would rate on a 4-point Likert scale to the extent to which each variable affected decision making. Another article which played part with this aspect of our debate was the client's gift-giving behavior can be understood as lying across 2 dimensions, which is the Garrick article. The first dimension relates to the ethical implication of receiving of the gift. For instance, gifts can range from having little or no ethical implication to being unethical. The second dimension relates to the therapeutic meaning of the gift. Gifts can range from possessing relatively low to high levels of the therapeutic meaning. This created 4 categories which gifts can fall into. So again, this article touches on this aspect of the debate because it does insinuate and touch on the fact that gifts can be accepted in certain circumstances. So table 1 within this study is the category of gifts. It shows here the level of therapeutic meaning and significance as it relates to the level of ethical concern. So what the table is laying out for you is how these two have a relationship and the outcome of that relationship. So for example, relatively low level of therapeutic significance in conjunction with relatively high levels of ethical concern create high level of ethical concern, risk of ethical violation, and low level of therapeutic meaning and significance. Again, for example, relatively low levels of therapeutic significance with relatively low levels of ethical concern create minimal ethical risk, as well as low level of therapeutic meaning and significance. Table 2 demonstrates this relationship again, and also gives therapists kind of a step-by-step on decision-making and how to react. So again, it shows the level of therapeutic meaning and significance with the level of ethical concern. So for example, relatively low levels of therapeutic significance related to relatively high levels of ethical concern. The therapist should really seek clarification, should reflect client behavior, affect, and situational content, consider self-disclosed personal thoughts and affect, should provide information regarding ethics of accepting specific gifts, and should ultimately really decline the gift while exhibiting positive regard and warmth. Again, there's a circumstance where there's relatively low levels of therapeutic significance and relatively low levels of ethical concern. In this circumstance, it's important to reflect client affect, behavior, and situational content, as well as self-disclose personal thoughts and affect, and then one can choose to accept or not accept, depending on the therapist's decision-making process. Continued, as was previously mentioned, does suggest that the following guidelines regarding gift giving and child therapy. So if parents ask, suggest to them they not bother with having the child give you the gift unless the child is really pushing for it. And in that circumstance, if the child is pushing for it, you have input, or just small gift or something the child has made. And when the child gives the gift, it's important to accept it gratefully due to hurt feelings with declining. Like previously mentioned, this really improves or can improve and facilitate the positive relationship between child and therapist, and then display the gift in the spot where the child can see. Again, like I said, these articles had both the pro and the counter aspects. So Bayer and Young within this article also suggests one should be very cautious and try at all costs to avoid acceptance of gifts. And right here we have all of our references for you guys at the end of our PowerPoint, which we will include within our discussion board posts for anyone to reference as needed. And now I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Sarah.
Thanks, Chelsea. Now that we have heard both sides of the argument, I'll quickly summarize. The pro side of our argument agrees that behavior analysts should abide by the ethical code of 1.06 Part D. It is argued that accepting a gift from a client could possibly lead to a multiple relationship. However, the counter side of the argument disagrees with the ethical code. The counter side believes that accepting and giving gifts can strengthen and build a positive rapport with clients. However, on both sides of the argument, it is important to understand the meaning, timing, and value of any gift. And when denying a gift, it is important to be respectful and professional. As you can see in our debate, this can be a controversial topic and widely debated. Thank you for watching.